Welcome to another episode of Bulletproof. My name is Steve Stanulis. We have another amazing guest. Before we discuss who it is, and again, I'm really excited to have a gentleman like this on. It gets my juices flowing for this type of podcast. Most people break under pressure. Today's guest spent years operating in environments where hesitation actually can hurt people. And now he says business, leadership, and even society are entering that same gray space. Joseph Kopser, how you doing, brother?
Steve, it's good to be on the show. I'm doing great this morning.
Yeah. I mean, you already had a busy day already. You already, was it ran
Yeah,
10 miles? Was it 2 miles you
it was
ran or
two. It
walked?
was 2 miles with a ruck, about 45 pounds, as a part of an event called Carry the Load. It's done just before Memorial Day weekend to remind people that Memorial Day weekend is not just about Indy cars, barbecues, and the start of summer, but more importantly, it's to remember the fallen who have gone before us. That's why I don't try to correct people, but whenever they say Happy Memorial Day weekend, I just say, well, how about we just remember Memorial Day weekend? Because it's
Yeah,
really not a happy occasion, especially for those families that left people behind. So it's a great event. We had a couple hundred people out this morning.
nice,
Hot
nice.
morning here in Austin, Texas, 84 degrees by the time we stepped off, and it was a good
Mhm.
time.
No, that's amazing. And again, that's right. I mean, you say that it's a great point because I think, we all look at it, and I don't say we. I mean, I understand, but a lot of people, especially kids, for them, a Memorial Day weekend means the start of summer, right? A 3-day weekend for off of school. So they don't really, unless you have military family or you're from that background, most people don't obviously realize and respect why this was even created. It's just a lot of people. It's a beginning of summer, and
Yep.
it's a 3-day weekend for kids. So yes. So it's really a amazing holiday for an amazing reason that I think a lot of people actually have lost why this was even created. So absolutely, kudos to military and everybody that's lost someone.
Yeah.
Even again, it's happening as we speak. Thank God not at a crazy rate, but yes. Um, so yes, God bless our soldiers and our military. Um, Before we get started, you have a
Yeah.
great resume. Excited to have you on. I'm going to just jump into some stuff. Um,
Please.
and first thing that comes to mind, and again with background. Now, you went to West Point, correct?
Right. Yep.
Why West? Why what intrigued you to go to West Point? Why what was it? Something you always
Ooh.
wanted to do, or did you kind of fall into that, or was that something like you aspired to do growing up?
Yeah, no. Great question. Great place to start because it really does tell the arc of kind of my life, if you will. So, no, I did not grow up in a military family. In fact, around Memorial Day weekend, the best remembrance and recognition, my dad would always have us watch The Longest Day or D-Day or something just to kind of take us back, as a kid of the 70s and 80s. But also as a kid in the 70s and 80s, growing up in Lexington, Kentucky, we didn't have a lot of money. My dad made it very clear from the beginning, he took him 8 years to finish college. My mother didn't even finish college, and so they wanted me to go, but they didn't have any money for me to go. So they said very early on, you're going to need to pay for this. So scholarships were something I was always working on, trying to do good in school as a kid. And then I discovered the academies where you could go to an academy, get a 4 year education, and then serve your country. But at the
Mm.
time, I'm a nerd. I'm big into space and science and all that kind of cool stuff. I wanted to
Right.
go and be at the Air Force Academy. Then I had a graduate from West Point that lived in my community who came to my high school and said, "Now, Joseph, I get it. You want to go to the Air Force Academy, but why do you want it so bad?" And I said, "Well, I want to be an astronaut and be in space and all that." And he said, "Well, did you know that West Point has had a significant number of astronauts?" I said, "No."
Mhm.
He said, "Do you know that the Air Force was born out of the Army?" I said, "No." He said, "Just go to West Point, and all your listeners, especially those that are in New York and get up there easy, go to West Point, and what you will notice today, as I noticed in 1989 when I visited, is that all the statues at West Point were to people,
Mhm.
who all of them had graduated from West Point, with the exception of just a few revolutionary heroes like George Washington. And the reason why that's important, not only for what you do with your podcast and stories about leadership, is that West Point was about the person. And whether they
Mhm.
sent you on a helicopter and you were a pilot and later in NASA or the Air Force, or if you were in tanks or you were in Bradleys or you were in an infantryman, no matter where you were in the military, what they wanted to do was make sure that you were best prepared to do your job. And that's what I fell in love with. So here it was my senior year in high school. I thought I was going to go to the Air Force Academy. I did a quick pivot at the last minute, went to West Point, loved it, never looked back. And I've always had an affinity for the academy, and that became really the wellspring of all the time and service to country that I've had the last 35, 6, 7 years since I stepped on post the very first time.
I mean, what was your biggest misconception about West Point,
Well,
as
see,
opposed to when you, in other
yeah,
words, a lot of people, like I said, I've never been to West Point. So, um, when I have when you think of anything, right, you have a vision of what it's going to be like, right? When you first went, was it
yeah,
like what you thought it was going to be, or was it not? Or, when you step on campus for the
yeah.
first time, what is the major difference from what you thought?
So first of all, when you do visit West Point for the first time, I want to be your personal tour guide and take you around. I'll fly up any chance I get. The second thing to your question about what do you expect? So I knew it was going to be hard. Like I knew they'd be yelling at me. I knew they'd be pressuring me. I knew they were going to try to make it mental. That's kind of what you sign up for. What I
Right.
didn't remember or reflect on or realize until I got there is that your starting class is about 1,000 people. You're looking at 1,000 people who are very similar to you. They're all hard
Right.
charging. They were all, great in their high school. They were all either great in sports or great in academics or great in leadership or some combination of. Many of them have come from the Army. They went from high school into the military and then left the military to go back to West Point. So you're literally surrounded by 1,000 hard chargers just like you. And that was probably the coolest realization is that not only was I trying to do my best, but every single woman and man left and right of me was trying to do the same thing. I'd say that was probably the biggest shock, a pleasant surprise, if anything.
No, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, I can imagine. And again, everybody who's going there is in some way or somehow kind of similar as far as, uh, like you said, academically, physically, everybody has the same aspirations. So again, it's like going into any type of military anywhere.
Yeah.
Everybody, bravado is high, right? Testosterone's, so also again, you come out and obviously, and you're a combat veteran, which is amazing. When did you serve, and where did you serve,
Yeah,
Joe?
so I served on active duty from 1993 when I left West Point. I was commissioned as
Mm,
a cavalry officer in the United States Army. I served for a full 20 years. And
wow.
then in terms of where I served, all over the place. My wife and I, who, by the way, I met Amy on my very first day of my very first
Oh,
assignment when I was reporting into my first unit in Fort Bliss in El Paso in June of 1994. So from there, the Army took us all around the country. We were at Fort Bliss, we were at Fort Carson, Colorado, Fort Knox, Kentucky, then to Fort Hood, Texas. Then I got a cool assignment to actually teach at West Point. And then en route to do that, they send you for a 2 year graduate degree, which is how I ended up at Harvard, and then
mhm.
ended up 3 years teaching at West Point. Then, as we say in the Army, back to the muddy boots. So away from the academic, strategic, nerdy stuff, then back to the muddy boots. And that was in Fort Bliss, Texas, as the war was really kicking off. And this was 2005 to 9. I was there. And then after that, then
Now
to the
that's.
Pentagon.
So I'm sorry, Joe. I don't mean to interrupt. So that's
Yeah.
Kuwait, right?
No, no.
That's
So just to get the timeline, yeah. So get the timeline right. So in 2004, I was teaching.
right.
Well, 2000, September 11th happened while I was in graduate school. So I
Mhm.
was driving into work or driving into school or into class that one morning in September. And during that time, many of my peers were also military officers who we all wanted to leave graduate school and go back to our units. But the Army
Mhm.
wouldn't let us. They were just like, nope, that is your assignment. You go do that. There'll be plenty of time for this war. And
Right.
just like your other guest, Jimmy May, I was listening to your interview just like him, we thought the war was going to be over pretty quick, so everybody was gunning to get to a unit. In 2004, while I was still teaching at West Point, one of the summers, I just raised my hand and said, "Send me to Iraq, send me to Baghdad." Dude, as an individual, I'll join any team, any group, whatever you need me to do.
Right.
Because I was in a strategic academic assignment teaching at West Point, they actually put me on staff in Saddam Hussein's old palace, which was the headquarters of the American presence there. That was the first trip to Iraq. Second trip to Iraq happened when I was at Fort Bliss, and I deployed with the First Cavalry Division, specifically First Cavalry, Ninth, First Squadron, Ninth Cavalry, and then later Second Squadron, Seventh Cavalry, 27 Cav. And that was a 14-month tour, and then came back. So all in, probably had 15, 16 months in Iraq away from the family. Uh, not a lot of fun time to be away from the family, but it's what I signed up to do, and that's why I
Right.
just
Sure.
loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because again, it's funny how like paths cross, right? And now all this time after, right? So 9/11, yeah, I was there as a cop, right? And obviously I was there the first night, right? Which was a shit show, right? Because it was still a rescue, right? So we
Yeah.
were in the for lack of a better term, we used to call it the pit,
Hmm.
where the towers fell. But again, we as not only I want to say as police officers and firemen and EMS and whoever was there helping, we're not prepared, obviously not prepared and have the skill and or the equipment
Yeah.
to do this, right? Because it was out of nowhere. We thought nobody ever thought this was going to happen. Um, and again, we had no masks, right? Everything we still got, all this shit was fucking um, flying all over the place, the asbestos and all that nonsense. They ran out of hard hats. So the cranes are coming over our heads, right? We have no hard hats,
Yep.
no masks. We're siphoning through, you know. And again, it was crazy. The first couple of days were crazy because,
Yep.
again, we were hoping to find people, and that was a no bueno. But the point is, it's funny, right? And again, the only reason why I'm sharing this, I never even share all that stuff, is because 25 years later, we're talking, right? And that was the ending of my NYPD career. Uh, I got injured and all that stuff, but that's like the beginning of yours, right? So
Yep.
it's like a cross, right? So
Yep.
so it's ironic in a weird way that now we're talking, and then again, it's a crossroads of life. I only did not even 8 years, 7 years in the NYPD, and I got out. Thankfully, I wasn't always I came from a family of military and police officers, so it was always preordained. That's
Yeah.
what I was
You were
going to
going to
do.
serve. You were going to serve.
Right. So it was like, yeah, you do whatever you want to do. You want to do this. That's a dream. This is what you're doing. You know what I mean? So, um, and I came from Staten Island. So Staten Island, if people are not familiar with the five boroughs, it's very heavily to the right. It's either police, sanitation, firemen, or gangsters. That's what lived on Staten Island. So yes. So I didn't want to go with John Gotti. So I decided, and I'm kidding, tongue in cheek, but it's just funny. It always amazes me when you hear somebody is ready to be deployed, as I'm saying, I'm getting the fuck out of here, type of thing. So yes. So
But there's a
that's
common
why
thread though in many of your
there's a common
podcasts
thread.
and what you're saying today and about our paths crossing, which is you and the other first responders and the firefighters and EMS,
Uh,
you ran, as we say in the Army, you ran to
right.
the sound of the guns. You
Yeah.
went to where the trouble was. While so many people were going that way, you were
Right.
going this way. And that's a special breed. I mean, that's not everybody does that. And by the way, it's okay that some people don't do that. I'm not saying everybody has to be, everybody can serve in their own way, but that's
Right.
why mornings like this with Carry the Load, we recognize not just our fallen memory of our warfighters, but also the first responders,
Sure.
because they too go into the line of fire. By the way, every single day in a lot of
Everything.
places, not
Sure.
just warfare. So thank you for that.
Sure. No, and likewise. So tell me what it's like when you get, deployed over there. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you never, why would anybody go to Iraq anyway? Not to
Well,
sound,
the two deployments were so completely different. I'll give you quick snapshots for your listeners and viewers. So the first one was before all of the IEDs really started to take off. So if you think about the time I got there in summertime, it was like June. I remember we flew out on Father's Day, June of 2004. You want to talk about a quiet airplane? Put
Uh,
300 soldiers, half or more of them dads, on Father's Day flying to Iraq. I'll never forget that. Gives me chills when I think about it. So when I flew over on that mission, again, I was joining the staff working in the headquarters. So it was freaking surreal. It was only like 14 months after we invaded Iraq. We were still occupying literally Saddam Hussein's palace complex. They put up porta
now,
johns out in the, yeah.
now, Joe, was that famous picture where they're pulling down his
So
statue?
that was the year before, yeah, when the
Oh,
Marine
you
when
wore that?
they've got this
Okay.
big recovery vehicle and they're pulling down Saddam Hussein's statue,
Yeah, yeah,
which,
yeah, yeah.
by the way, I think it's a guy in Dallas that has that statue, but we'll talk about that later.
That's
So
fucking
anyway,
great.
so 14 months after that statue came down, then I show up. And what was so cool, and I got pictures of this. So across the street from Saddam's palace was his other palace because he didn't give a shit about his people. He just liked making palaces. And
Right.
this was where he had his secret underground bunker, which I can only best describe. It was his living quarters. And back then we could still walk through it before it was too much of a health hazard. I could best describe it as Graceland. If anybody in here is an Elvis fan and they've ever been to Elvis's place. Now,
Mm.
Elvis, died in the 70s, but Saddam Hussein apparently kept his memory alive all the way up until the 2000s because this place was shag carpet. It was like vinyl records. I mean, it reminded me of of Elvis's Graceland. But what was really cool is he was such a paranoid freak that in every room of his entire underground bunker, he had a listening device. And next to his bed, he had all these switches that would allow him to just flip a switch and listen in on anybody in any room at any time because he was paranoid. So anyway, so that was my
Right.
first deployment. It was just weird in a good way. I helped with the elections in January 2005 and all that kind of cool stuff. Second trip was far more like what you see on TV and you see in the movies. Then I was a executive officer or the deputy chief of staff of an 1,100 person squadron. Most of the time I spent there was with 27 Cav, and they were in the mix. So Nineveh province, which is about the size of New Jersey, Nineveh province to the north only had one ground combat squadron because down south, we were in Mosul. Down south was Baghdad, where all the heaviest fighting started. Then the Americans put 28 battalions into Baghdad in the early part of 2000, early spring of 2007. And then that just squished, kind of like, playing whack a mole. It just squished all the bad guys north. And then up north, which was where we were the only battalion, but that actually worked to our favor because now they couldn't just, and you experienced this as a cop going from precinct to precinct, you couldn't
Mhm.
just go as a bad guy from one battalion AO, one battalion area to another, which is what they did in Baghdad. And then when you went through too many different AOs, then you'd lose track and be like, well, wait, does 2-7 have them? Does 1-9 have them? Does 1-5 have them? But up with us, we were the only squadron up there. So we could chase the bad guy all over town. There was nowhere they could go. And it was a great opportunity for us to catch a lot of bad guys that were hurting a lot of Americans and Iraqis. So that trip was a lot different. That had more than a dozen, almost 2 dozen of our fallen soldiers that never came home from that trip. Saw some stuff that you never want anybody to see. I remind everybody that war is hell. Anybody that wants to cheer war and go get them and all this kind of stuff needs to ask the question first: are you going to go? Secondly, are any of your kids going to go? Because if they are, then let's talk about this. But if it's just rah rah from
Right.
the sidelines and you're not willing to put some skin in the game, then we need to have a different conversation. But we can do that later if you want. But anyway, both trips were meaningful. I got to serve my country overseas. The hardest toll that it took, though, was on my family.
Mhm.
My girls at the time were young, elementary school, middle school. I missed birthdays, Christmases, Thanksgivings.
Yeah.
But that's what I signed up to do. They didn't sign up for that, but I did.
Right. No, no, no doubt. No doubt. Well, here's another thing. I'm gonna, like I said, I don't, my goal on this podcast has never been is to get, this is not about, I'm not Howard Stern and I'm not trying to get, um, you know what I mean? Or, I'm not trying to get crazy. right? Or talk about shit that is, is political and it's not. But it's just stuff that I've always thought about, right? And would like to ask because you obviously were on the front lines, right? First of
Yeah,
all, my first point is what a fucking idiot Saddam Hussein is because he had the world by
yeah.
the balls, right? God knows who he was fucking, right? He had every chick possible. Um, he had the life, he had everything, right? He just, I
Yeah, he
guess,
was he was he
obviously,
was a evil tyrant dictator. Let me give you an
sure,
idea of just how evil this guy was. So he had like 28 palaces all over his country, all over Iraq.
right,
And after the Persian Gulf War in 1991, 1992, he always said he wanted to kill George Herbert Walker Bush, President 41. And
mm,
in doing so, the CIA was always trying to keep track of him. And then every now and then, just when we thought we had him in our sights, we'd shoot a missile from somewhere and boom, blow something up. Once he realized that we were tracking him by watching from satellite images where these big caravans go to the various palaces, then we knew where he was sleeping. Then we were able to
right,
target him. But once he knew that, then he started having fake caravans go to different palaces. I'm like, okay,
right.
clever. So
Diversions,
then we figured out, well, wait a minute. We just got to wait to see where all the food goes to feed, 300 people. And then when they throw the trash out the next day or the next couple of days, then we know, he's there. Then when
right,
he realized we were doing that to him, here's a country that's under embargo. Millions of his fellow citizens are starving. He's an evil tyrant. And on top of all of that, he decides, well, if the Americans are tracking me by caravans and food, put food and make food at all 28 of my palaces, even if I'm not there. Just the ultimate selfish waste of this guy. And so when he was finally captured and killed, it was a good day for the Iraqi people. No matter the controversies of whether or not we should have gone into that war
right.
and
Well,
all that kind of stuff, did
that's
we go in
always
for
the
the wrong
question,
reason?
right?
Yeah,
Right. So that's the question, Joe, and again, this is the always the conspiracy theorist. A lot of people said he was almost used as a distraction from going away, from Osama bin Laden. That really, you know, why all of a sudden the attention was put on him instead of obviously Osama. Um, what were your thoughts on that? Were you
yeah,
surprised when you got the poor, or
huge.
when the war started over there instead of focusing on Afghanistan?
Very surprised. Very surprised. The war, the effort was in Afghanistan. We took all of our national assets, all of the goodwill of the planet to go find Osama bin Laden, track him down, and bring him to justice. That was the mission in Afghanistan. The problem was at the time, if you go back in a Wayback Machine, now you're talking 2000, you
Mm,
go into a
right.
midterm election year 2000, Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, they wanted to not only hold seats and win elections in the midterms, but they
Mm,
also didn't want the American people to think that this was going to be a forever war. So they did the war on the cheap, which is not how you fight a real war. And I encourage any of your listeners or viewers to go into the Google machine and type in Eric Shinseki. So Shinseki is like SHI or SHENSIKE. Anyway, he was the Army Chief of Staff in 2002, 2003 timeframe. Congress
mm,
brought him in and said, okay, the White House is thinking about going into Iraq. If we go into Iraq to bring Saddam Hussein to justice, what will it take from a military standpoint? And he said in front of God and country, oh, it's going to take like 700,000 troops, far more than we had or prepared. Most of our troops were in Afghanistan, which means you would have to pull troops from Afghanistan, pull them off that mission to send them into Iraq. He said, we can win this war just like we did in the Persian Gulf in 1991, but you got to commit assets. And the very next day, Secretary Rumsfeld, in an act I'll never forgive, announced Shinseki's replacement, which is a kind of a way to say you're fired without saying you're fired, because as soon as you announce your successor, you're basically saying, we no longer consider you to be in charge. We're going to put this guy
right.
in charge after you. And so it was a total blow. And these aren't my opinions. There's a lot of this is documented that we spread
No,
ourselves
absolutely.
too thin. We spread ourselves
Right.
too thin as a
Well, we
nation.
say don't fight two wars on two fronts, right? Because
That's what we
you
did.
spread yourself. But so was the morale um, sharing the same uh, thought as what we're talking about now, as far as being sent over there? A and B, couldn't, and again, I don't know this because couldn't technically, I know it, and it's 25 years later. Well, couldn't we just obliterated him in like one day, like we did when I ran today, or was it more of a tedious type of to
Well,
get in
now
there?
now you're asking an even bigger, broader question, which I think is important, which is a country's strength. So the strength of the United States is not just our military, it is
Hmm.
not just our economy, and it is not just our people and other factors. It is actually,
Hmm.
to simplify it, it's four things. So it's diplomacy. It's what kind of swagger can we bring to the world to make them listen and pay
Hmm.
attention? That's diplomacy. The other is, to your point, intelligence. What secret spy stuff do we have? What satellites do we have? What can we use to keep an eye on, keep tabs on? Is he doing chemical weapons or is he not doing chemical weapons? Remember, that was the whole big thing.
Yeah, sure.
CIA said he's got chemical weapons. Turned out he didn't.
He
But we
didn't.
know he
Right.
did. We know he did before, but he just
Right.
got rid of them. We don't know what he did with them. I think he sent them all into Syria. So diplomacy, intelligence, but you also have military might, which is most of what we've been talking about, and you also have economic might, sanctions, and the
Right.
buying power. And you're seeing that play out today between the United States and China and other places.
Right.
But your question is a great question, which is, could we have just contained Saddam Hussein and dealt with him in a different way? And I absolutely believe we could have and should have after and dealt with him after we were done dealing with
Right.
Osama bin Laden. But I was
Right.
in a lot of meetings where a lot of top brass, all the different services, 3 and 4 stars, were noticeably complaining that our assets, like, I mean, we only had so many satellites back in the day, and that
Right.
satellite could
Right.
either take pictures of Afghanistan or it could take pictures of Iraq. It
No.
can't take pictures of both at the same time. And so when you
Wow.
have to make that choice, you're spreading out your assets. And that's sadly why both wars took way longer than they should have. We should have done what Colin Powell said, which is if you're going to go in with overwhelming force, which is what General Shinseki wanted to do. But anyway, but morale, you brought up morale. For the soldiers on the ground, almost to the person that I knew, served with, and talked to, we were there under A, a spirit of service to country, and B, a real belief that our leaders had our best interests in mind and weren't doing it as a distraction or weren't doing it for political favor or weren't doing it for other reasons. And that's what we still need to believe because otherwise, in an all volunteer army, which we are today, an all volunteer military, it's going to be hard getting people to volunteer if they think that their
Oh yeah.
leaders are doing it for the wrong reasons.
Right. Absolutely. I agree. I agree. So what were your thoughts? I mean, so after all said and done and everything went, luckily, wasn't and that we didn't end up like Vietnam. Um, were you surprised at the end of the day when we finally went in and got Osama bin Laden?
I was thrilled. I mean, I always knew we would hopefully get them one day. In fact, Admiral McCraven, who was in charge of that mission, is a
Mm,
graduate of the University of Texas here in Austin. I get to see him at events occasionally. I even got to interview him, like you and
that's
I are
amazing.
talking today. Got to interview in a fireside chat. He's an amazing national hero. Like, read everything, and
Right.
anybody in your audience, read about Admiral Bill McCraven, William McCraven. But he led that mission and finally got, let me see, he supervised the mission. He
Sure.
wasn't on the mission. But we got him. And the point in that story, when it comes to thinking about diplomacy, intelligence, military, and economics, majority of the time, we can use the other levers that we have, other levers of power, and then be
Mm,
very surgical about how we use military force. And going in and grabbing Osama bin Laden like we did was a surgical extraction. And there've been movies made about it, of course, but
sure.
it was the right thing to grab him, obviously.
Absolutely. And so again, my last question, and we'll move on with
Oh,
this
we can
only
keep
because I'm
going.
No, no, because I'm interested with this. So, do you think, or is it possible from inception with our intelligence and the CIA and all this stuff for again for even political reasons, or the midterms or whatever, wouldn't it have been better just to use that intelligence, or again, it was just a different time to go in and get them within the first fucking 2 months, and the country would have been, the Republicans would have won for the next 30 years if that would have happened. Because that was the most time I believe I saw so much solidarity between everyone, race, political
Yep.
views, this, that. Everybody was one. There was no for you had that time, right? It was like a
Yeah.
window of time, and then it started. Everybody loved the firemen, the NYPD. They were heroes, and then it started closing, right? Like everything. But did we not have the ability back at that point or the intelligence to find out where he was?
Well, so you're really talking about two different things. So first of all, I don't want to armchair quarterback my
No,
friends and
no, and
colleagues, everyone else.
I'm just asking
But
your
but
opinion.
yeah, to your point, yeah. But from just the sheer technology, no. We didn't have anywhere near the capability in 2002 and 2003 to grab bad guys like we do today. I mean, you
Okay.
truly have to live off the grid and really live in a cave nowadays for us to not be able to find you. And that's not just military grade sensors, even in the civilian sector. I mean, we've got farmers now that can use civilian grade, private sector, not
Right.
military grade quality satellite feeds and satellite imagery to pinpoint as they're going through their field on their tractor where to plant which seed. And we can figure
Yeah.
that out from say, so if you're a bad guy today, it's really hard to hide from us, which is why it was really easy to go down and grab Maduro in Venezuela. And so, bad guys need to kind of watch out if they want to get anywhere near technology. And the humor of it
Ask
is,
ask
yeah.
ask Nancy Guthrie's if it's easy. Uh,
Well,
ask that the Guthrie's if how easy it is to find someone today, because Bob, I'm only kidding. That's
yeah,
another
well,
fucking
but see, here's the
disaster. But
great point. See, sadly, everything we have to believe now is that Nancy Guthrie is no longer with us, or what,
well,
meaning she and that group have almost no digital footprint. And a
mm,
guy like Osama bin Laden or Maduro or other leaders around the world up to nefarious means, they have a digital footprint because
mm,
they have to be in charge of it. Like Putin, we believe now that Putin is starting to see losses on the Ukrainian front in a way that he's never had in this 4-year war.
right.
It's because the Ukrainians are turning the tide and going after him, and he's now apparently, according to some sources I'm reading in the papers,
Mm,
spending a lot of his nights in bunkers because even he knows it's hard to hide. So, yeah, the bad guy, now the victims, to your point, the victims can be still hard to find, but the bad guys who still want to be in charge, meaning they got to
right.
communicate to be in charge, that's getting harder and harder and harder and harder with all these
Absolutely.
new tech.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. So um, we've come up to our lightning round, Joseph. So we need to.
All right.
Well, I need the first thing that comes to your mind, and then we'll obviously get
Uh-oh.
into what you're doing now, and yeah, and then none of them are crazy. Um, I'm going to start. This one's not even on the list that they made me, but because I do a lot of filmmaking. What is the most realistic? This is not even on the. This is my fucking
Yeah.
question right now. What is the most realistic war movie you've ever seen?
Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah,
Saving
I
Private
believe that. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think
because it
that's
goes into the emotion. See, everybody thinks a war movie is all the bing bang boom, bing bang boom, but there are actually more hours of silence, quiet, and reflection that kind of creep into your brain and into your heart. That is why Saving Private Ryan, in my opinion, is the most realistic war movie ever made.
yeah. I think that's the consensus. I believe anyway. What separates a real leader from someone just playing the role?
What their real interests are. So if you're truly a public servant, you are always looking down at the people that you are working and trying to lift them up, working with them and lifting them up. If you are not a true leader, you are literally stepping on their backs, looking up, trying to get to your next promotion, your next job, and you're just stepping on people. That's the easiest way to distinguish between a real leader and not.
What's more dangerous, fear or ego?
Oh, I would definitely say it's ego because ego clouds your judgment. Fear,
Mhm.
everybody's got fear. Fear, if harnessed, becomes an unbelievable strength and a tool to point forward. But ego, oh my God, that gets in the way. I've seen so many companies fail because of ego.
What's the biggest weakness you see in modern men today?
Modern men, I cannot, I don't know if we have enough time in this lightning round. Why in God's name do men
Uh,
today think that the success of others around them mean that they are a failure? Why do men today think that when others are getting ahead, think that they are falling behind? I think the biggest problem today is that men today believe this ethos of the past that if they just showed up, that's all they had to do. And maybe in the 50s and the 40s, that was all they had to do because women weren't allowed to work in places. Most places were whites only. Nowadays, just do your job, just do your best. If others get ahead of you, it's not you falling behind. Just because others are being promoted, you're not being looked over. That's the biggest problem today that I'm trying to help with men, especially white men, middle-aged white men, is this world out ain't to get you. Just keep going forward and celebrate the success of others around you. Because at the end of the day, it's teamwork that makes the dream work.
there you go. What's one uncomfortable truth society avoids talking about?
Oh, wow. Death. I
Death.
mean, everybody's going to die. As somebody who's been a soldier and seen too many of my friends die, live in the day. I mean, it doesn't mean, run out your 401k and deplete all your savings, but we don't talk about death. Have a conversation. If you're lucky to still have parents alive, have a conversation about their final years. Have a conversation about their effects. Don't wait for the day when they do pass, whether it's suddenly or over a long illness, to then say, well, wait, what are your passwords? Where did you keep all your stuff? What did you want us to do with your dog? Like, talk about death. Most other societies and cultures around the world do. For some reason, the Americans, we don't talk about death anywhere near that we should.
All right, that's something I didn't think you were going to say, but very good. If silver, yeah, okay, it's easy for me to say. If the Civil War, Jesus Christ, if the
Civil War.
Civil War, no, I was going to say the Civil War, right? If the society today got chaotic tomorrow and it was an apocalypse, who survives first? The smartest, the toughest, the richest, or the most adaptable?
Oh, it's easily the most adaptable. There's a famous study about the POWs that survived Vietnam, and I commend it to anybody on your listeners. The optimists didn't survive with the same high numbers as the ones that did survive because they were like, tomorrow's going to be better. Tomorrow's going to be better. We're going to get out. Eventually, day 567 came and they just lost their optimism. The pessimists, they did not survive because they were just down on themselves, down. The ones who survived with the greatest frequency, to your point about being most adaptable, they were realists. They said,
Mhm.
this sucks. Maybe tomorrow's better. Maybe tomorrow's worse. But I am here right now in the present. This is the reality I am. Those are the ones that survived in the greatest numbers. And if the apocalypse comes, it'll be the realists that know how to adapt that will survive.
Very good. What's the most valuable lesson being in Iraq taught you?
Mm. You have to depend on your brothers and sisters, flat out. If you can't learn to lean on someone, not just in the firefight, and trust them that they're doing what they're doing, but at the same time, when you're back and you're cleaning your gear and you're getting ready for the next mission, if you can't lean on them to share your grief, to share your sorrow, to share your concern, if you can't in a healthy way learn how to lean on each other, you're not going to do well in this world because we're pack animals by nature. And so I saw just on display nearly every single day the heroics of the men and women that I served with. And that to me is what still fuels me today. And I haven't stepped foot in Iraq since 2007, nearly 20 years. In fact, our 20th anniversary is next year. And so that's what I learned the most was just how important it is to depend on each other.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah, so you survived it. Yeah, you did well. No trip ups other than me stumbling on a word. So actually the trip up was usually on the guest. Today was on me. So Joe, where do we find you today? I know you're doing a lot of speaking, keynote speaking and stuff. Uh, if somebody wanted to follow you that's listening to the episode or reach out, how do they do that? And it's a two-point question, really. So, what are you doing and how do we find you?
Yeah. So what I'm doing today is continuing to pay it forward. So as we've discussed in the story, I'm the product of two or three generations of coaches, teachers, mentors, platoon sergeants, sergeant major who made me who I am. And I realized that it took that teamwork that we talked about a minute ago. So now what I'm doing is turning around and finding that next generation, frankly, at any age and stage, doesn't have to be younger than me, just people in their next journey to help pull them forward. And the way that I do that today is in business, creating companies in business and nonprofits, a lot of work with military and veteran groups, looking at the future, things like the space industry and where we're going with rockets and satellites. So when you boil all that together, you referred to a lot of the public speaking that I do. I am in front of audiences a lot. And what I enjoy about it is twofold. Number one, I'm not just somebody who enjoys the stage and can tell a story, but I'm also somebody who has, to the point of the questions you asked me today, I've been there and I've done that. Like, I have not only the stories to tell, but those are the stories of the people that I serve with and the experiences I've had in life. So audiences tend to enjoy that a little bit more than just a lecture on leadership, but it's
Right.
a lecture on leadership with the storytelling that goes with it. And you keep the audience, and you got your time in Hollywood, producers and storytelling. You know that if you lose an audience in the beginning, you've just wasted that
Mhm.
conference, you've wasted that board meeting, you've wasted that offsite. But if you can capture the audience and give them a narrative and keep them going in that story, then things are gonna be great. So easiest way to find me is at the website josephkopser.com. They can find me on LinkedIn and follow me there. And then feel free to just email me straight up at joseph@josephkopser.com. And I'm happy to respond and meet with more of your listeners and viewers.
Awesome. Well, yeah, there you have it. And like I said, I will say one last thing before we go. I agree with keynote speaking. It's one thing to speak about leadership and perseverance and all these different things.
Yeah,
But I think somebody who has actually lived it is actually, my opinion, is a lot more credible. And
right.
again, and there's some brilliant speak. Obviously, I love Tony Robbins. I love Jack Canfield. I love all those guys. But to hear somebody who's actually in war, in Iraq, see people die, it's one thing to talk about it and give an opinion, but to come from a place of living it, it's so more credible to
Yeah.
me.
And to your
And I,
point, a lot of the audiences that bring me in, I talk about business and leadership in their companies, and I tell them, I said, look, business and
mhm,
making payroll and launching a new product and merging a company, like all these really stressful situations, hiring and firing, all those
mhm,
really stressful situations are the most intense you can get in society, short of somebody
sure,
shooting at you. And I've had a
sure.
lot of fun not only getting shot at, but also trying to make payroll. And that adrenaline rush, that sense of purpose, is what I try to convey to a lot of audiences. And so you're right. It's not just telling the story about war, but relating it to people in their everyday lives who may
Sure.
never, hopefully, ever have to see combat, but they can take those lessons learned. So that's why I love sharing.
There you go. Well, Joe, I'm sorry, I'm calling you like we're best friends, but Joe, Joseph, whatever you prefer. I always like to be called Steve because Steven reminds me when my teachers used to get mad at me, or
Yeah.
my mother was going to punish me if I was only Steven. So, uh, Joseph Kopser, thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review. You can see us on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We want to thank everybody for making us a top 10 podcast. And again, it's not for just myself, it's for amazing guests like Joseph. Joe, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Again, anything you need, anything you're launching, progressing, please don't hesitate to come back on. I'd love to hear what you're doing. I
I
commend
want to
you
stay in touch as well,
and I appreciate everything you did. And thank you so much for your service.
and yours as well.
Everybody, stay bulletproof. We'll see you next week.